saw the rest of the class, like rest of the class, like, and they didn't understand. Like, he came to school every day, but why is he failing? So they started labeling him as a behavioral kid, something wrong with him, he got to get right and everything like that. Okay, so that's when I stepped in. I started spending time with him, talking to him, learning his background, what he had went through, what is he going through now, how he goes in the corner store and he got to watch, he got to angle himself in such a position he knows who's coming in and who's going out at the same time, because one of his friends got shot in the back of his head. And light bulb clicked. The guy wanted to graduate. He just needed to be stationed in a certain way to make it more accommodating based on his experience. And this is the key thing. That's why we have to dwell with each other in understanding. We cannot anticipate people to live like we live, especially if their experiences is different. You never been in a store, or you never heard of a loved one being in the store and they got shot and killed. So don't label that person abnormal, just label that person as having a different experience. Can they regroup and become successful citizens amongst the world? Sure. So I started meeting with each teacher. I said, change his seating. Make his seating accommodate his environment, that he sees everybody that's coming in the classroom and everybody that's going out. Because his thoughts is becoming a distraction to his success. He wants to come to school and complete each class, but he's more worried about who's coming in and out the classroom. Because in your eyes, nobody's going to come in a classroom and shoot it up. But in his eyes, nobody would come into a corner store and shoot it up, but they did. So now, from that experience, he has a tendency to think that in any circumstances he in, that could happen. So he want to be ready and attentive. Attentive. I feel like I'm saying that word wrong. No, I'm real. But he wants to be present and alert enough to know his environment, who's coming in and who's going out. And so each teacher started accommodating him and positioning his desk so that he can, one, pay attention to the teacher, two, pay attention to his environment. He wasn't the type to sit in the middle of the class or the front. He needed to sit in the back on an angle. And guess what? He became a graduate. Guess what? He got his license to barber. And guess what? He ended up owning a barbershop. It was in him. But it was about accommodating his needs so he can manage them. Because then change his situation, be sensitive towards what he went through, and he'll be able to manage his emotions. No, you as a teacher, is not your responsibility to manage his emotions. But if you make the environment conducive enough for him to focus on learning right then and there, he learns naturally how to manage his emotions. And so I bring that up to show you to the success, because a loud noise coming in, slamming a door was a trigger for him. Came from a traumatic experience. He's used to gunshots. And in this day and age, no matter what race, color, or creed, we're all going through some traumatic experience to one extent or another. And we need to be accommodating. If you are going through that, reach on a professional. Because your girlfriend, your loved one might be saying, or looking at you a certain way. And you don't have to be looked at a certain way. You're fine. You just need to manage that emotion and come out of it. Flashbacks where images of the traumatic event comes into your mind suddenly. If you're repeatedly thinking about the traumatic experience, every time you have a downtime, it comes up. Something that needs to be managed. You don't have to suffer for the rest of your life thinking about that traumatic experience. Physical symptoms such as tense muscles, trembling, shaking, nausea, headaches, sweating, and tiredness. I'm a firm believer whatever is going on internally will come out externally. And then if it's not managed, even when you start seeing the external part of it, it could kill you. So you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? Is suffering worth it? If it's going to lead to death, why wake up every morning and you know this is something you're dealing with? Anybody's situation could change in a matter of a second. And that can be traumatizing. And those feelings that come out of the traumatic experience can be managed. You can remain functional for your kids, for your company, for your own success. That's why I'm bringing it up. Loss of activities, appetite, sex, daily activities, loss of interest of it. This is how you know you've been through a traumatic experience. Sadness, feeling of loss or aloneness. It's like a repeated feeling. Sleeping problems. Waking up having nightmares, so repeating that experience. Problems with thinking and concentrating. You can't focus. You all over the place. Preoccupation with thinking. Constantly. Other experience. Guilt and self-doubt. Guilt and self-doubt. Well, maybe if I did this, it wouldn't happen. Or maybe if I did that. Can't rewind time. The reality is it happened. Let's move forward through it. Could you do things different to not repeat history? Sure. But don't remain stuck in the what if or maybe I should. Don't walk around with guilt and self-doubt. You're suffering. Anger or irritability. Anger or irritability. You don't know where it comes from, but every time a present situation looks similar to the traumatic situation, you get angry and irritable. And you want to be out of it all of a sudden. And it doesn't mean it's going to equal out to the same results as the traumatic experience. It's just, it feels like it's about to happen. And so you get angry or irritable. They are amongst the many feelings that go on with traumatic experiences. And with all of them, they can be managed, resolved, and you can move forward and become successful. Now, children, they might not ever come to vocalizing the traumatic experience. Like all of a sudden daddy disappears, or all of a sudden daddy gets locked up, or all of a sudden mommy suffers from something that ends up in the hospital. And now their world is traumatized because it abruptly happens all of a sudden. Mommy leaves for work that morning, but she doesn't come back home. Or she comes back home and she doesn't wake up. It's like all those things. And so it becomes traumatic. And so then you start looking and you don't know why your kid is acting the way they acted, but it could be traumatizing. For anything out of the norm, their everyday activities to change, it could be traumatic for them. All of a sudden, their teacher just get fired. That could become a traumatic experience for them at school. And so they start acting out, and you don't know what's going on. So you have to be sensitive when it comes to kids. You have to watch their reactions. If they have reactions of being scared, being clingy, acting babyish, having nightmares, trouble, wetting in the bed, having aches and pains, having tantrums, not doing well at school, being suspended. All these reactions are normal reactions from abnormal events, traumatic events. And I have to stress they're normal. You are human. You're supposed to have some type of feeling out of every experience. So when you feel it, label it as normal, and then say, okay, now it needs to be managed because I don't want to function out of this feeling. Because if you function constantly out of that feeling, that's when it becomes abnormal. When you're always on edge. So as you observe your different responses from traumatic experiences, know that it could be managed. Know that you can come out of it. If you have a loved one or a family member or friend that has gone through a traumatic experience, there are certain steps that you can go through to help them manage it. You might have to spend, number one, you might have to spend extra time just chilling with them, just dwelling with them. Just so they can coast out of it in a normal way. You might have to change your schedule around and be with them a little longer every day. And that's normal and fine. And it's not always what you say. Sometimes it's not. If you're not a professional and they're not looking for any type of guidance, sometimes you just need a listening ear. And you take it in and you just dwell with them. Those can be key factors. You could talk about it if they say they want to talk about it. I wouldn't suggest saying I'm sorry. I'm sorry it happened, even if it was death. Because what are you sorry for? Death is a part of life. So let's process it together. My condolences. My condolences. That's anything. If you want to verbalize any level of empathy, my condolences. I'm sorry. I never, and that could be my only stance, but I never got when people said I'm sorry, because you can't bring back the person. You can't change the experience. So don't say I'm sorry. And I know it comes from a heartfelt place, but I'm still not an advocate for it. Because life happens. And sometimes very in an unscheduled way. So what you sorry for? You can't control it, I couldn't control it. Let's move forward. When it comes to kids, allow them to talk whenever they're ready to talk. Don't keep pushing. Go out to lunch with them and say, hey, how did you feel about that? Or what was your feelings around that? Or da-da-da-da. And let them gradually say how they felt about each experience. And then move forward. Keep an allotment that the person that went through the traumatic experience, whether they're an adult or a child, they might need special attendance encouragement, affection. And it's